Welcome back to Indie Design Week. Let's get to it with our next speaker. Hey, life moves at a very different speed here in the Midwest, and because of that, we need to reevaluate our messaging when it comes to topics of design and sustainability, and that's exactly what our next panel is going to cover. So here to talk about connecting Midwestern values to sustainability, please help me welcome Joe Yount, Andrea Haydon, Arin Anderson, and Adrian Russell.
All right, thank you, everyone. Glad to be here today. We're pretty excited to talk to you a little bit about this. I want to start off talking a little bit about, I'm Joe Yount. I'm an architect with Ratio Architects and also an AIA member. I am the director of the AIA Indiana Committee on the Environment. And I wanted to start the story here. We're all kind of familiar with the need to reduce carbon emissions, and in the architecture and design industry, something that we're focused on is the 2030 challenge, which is to try to get our buildings to be net zero carbon by the year 2030. So 9 years from now, no big deal. But we started the Committee on the Environment about 5 years ago with 5 other Indiana firms who had made the same commitment to the 2030 challenge. And we have some really great, very knowledgeable people in this group. But we also kind of found that in terms of reducing our carbon, we're all kind of banging our head into the wall in a lot of the same things. And to kind of describe our challenge, the building sector that, me and all the other architects of the world designed for, we're responsible for about 40% of the carbon emissions that warm the planet. And then, 11% of it is in the bricks and concrete that we put into the building. 28% is the energy that we use to heat and cool them and run our televisions and things like that. And then we also have a piece of this other 23%, depending on where we put them and how far you have to travel to get there. So a lot of the 2030 challenge goal is to use less energy than a standard building for building type in 2003. So if we're doing an office, we want to be using 100% less energy than a building did in 2003. Looking across the country here, we can see that California is about halfway there. Indiana is about 42% of the way there. Texas is 48. New York's 47%. And, the AIA National has a committee on the environment that gives out, top 10 awards to, the 10 best, most environmentally responsible projects in every year. And these are the projects that we look to try to, learn strategies from, borrow for our projects, and apply them to our projects in the Midwest. And there's a lot of them out on the West Coast and a fair amount of them out on the East Coast. In the Midwest, there's not quite so many here. We have a nice little zero in Indiana because we haven't won one yet. And then this is important, though, because 20% of the population lives in the Midwest, and we're responsible for 22% of the Midwest of the carbon emissions in the United States. If we look at just our little East Central part where Indiana is, this is 14% of the U.S. population and 13% of the carbon emissions. We've only got about 7% of the awards, so we don't really have a whole lot of great examples to learn from out here. Whereas on the West Coast, you've got 15% of the population, 9% of the carbon emissions, and a third of the awards. So there's a lot of great projects out in the Pacific West, and you can see sort of in their population to carbon emissions ratio in both the Pacific West and the Mid-Atlantic, there's a lot of success out there, but we know that it's different. And frankly, 30% of the problem is not solving 100% of the problem, and climate change is a global problem that we need to solve 100% of. So one of the challenges and I love these pictures, that we have to do is we have to design for heating and then design for cooling. So we look at this guy on the right here. He's got a thick suit with the greatest pattern I've ever seen in my life on it, and he's got his face to the sun. He's got the sun warming his face. He's got dark colors that absorb heat. He is set up to be in those snowy mountains. We have the person on the left here wearing, a white sun-reflective dress that sort of promotes airflow around the body to cool you off, and quite possibly the greatest sun hat I've ever seen. It almost functions as a whole tent. They sell this on Amazon, which is where I got the picture. So we have strategies like this for our buildings that aren't really too dissimilar, where we're doing overhangs to try to block out the very steep summer sun, but allow the shallow winter sun in to warm our building when it's cold outside. Use natural ventilation, open windows and things like that. which is also good for the prevention of COVID. So I recommend opening your windows on a daylight today. And then if we look at how this manifests itself in buildings, the building on the left is in a northern climate. You can kind of see some of the shadow lines and how deep, how thick the walls are through how deep the windows are set back. Whereas, in Africa, which is a very hot climate, you see a lot of overhangs. And actually, underneath that metal roof there, it's open. So air can flow in through the windows and rise up, kind of pull the heat off of our bodies. So you have this constant flow of cooler air at grade that comes out the ceiling. And then these big shades and keep what little rain you get out there out, and also keep the sun out. So these are two very different design strategies where we're trying to kind of wrap ourselves up in an awesomely patterned jacket and then wear a giant sun hat on the right. And so, we have criteria for how we design buildings in different climate zones. So we have got the cold climates up north where, this is the thick coat, and then we've got Miami where we've got the sun hat. And in Indiana, we have to design for both here. And this is a project that I worked on with Ratio, the Ivy Tech Muncie campus. And you can see that we have, a lot of these overhangs on the left. There's snow on the ground, and that way the sun is coming in and starting to heat it up a little bit. We've got thick walls, but also some glass to promote daylighting. And we've done some daylighting analysis on the building to try to use less energy from lighting. But, a lot of this kind of comes down to different climate design factors. And, just from the technical aspect of designing for these climates is really a lot different. In Indianapolis, it's we get snow and it's really hot and muggy in the summer. Our average low is 20 degrees. We have to design our buildings to stay warm in 20 degrees. We also have to design them to stay cool in 85-degree weather. So, Philadelphia has got a fairly similar condition, and the temperature delta is something I want to draw your attention to, because those are the two extremes that we have to design for. And while we see a lot of these projects in Seattle, in Portland, they're only designing for about a 40 to 50 degree range, whereas we're looking at 60 degrees spans. So, and then the average daily humidity, in Boston and New York City, where there's a lot of successful projects, they've got a little bit less humidity as well as a lower temperature range. So kind of what this means is that, in Florida, you've got to have a big air conditioner, and you may not even need a furnace. They build places in Miami with no furnaces because, on a day it gets down to 40 degrees, just wear a jacket in the $8 million condo that LeBron James bought, I'm sure. So, and then, in Maine, it's kind of the inverse. You'll hardly ever use your air conditioner. You don't need a lot of air conditioning capacity, but you're going to need a big furnace. Kind of going back to that Seattle, both of them are small. In Indiana, they're both big. And so when we kind of look across the Midwest here, we see, the temperature deltas. There's a lot of similar things in the Midwest, and we have a lot of similar, humidity issues. The temperature delta is not quite so high on the coast, and it's a little bit less extreme over here. But something interesting is that Denver has a very high temperature delta, but a very low humidity. And so we can actually use natural ventilation as a very viable strategy. Just this is another Ratio project, and you can see we've got a lot of sunshades on it to block out the sun. A lot of outcroppings here that also shade from east and west. And then we're able to naturally ventilate this lobby by just letting warm air rise up through the roof. And that's because the air outside is a lot of times it's not too humid. It's very comfortable, and you can do that. So when can we use it in Indianapolis? And we use a tool called Cove Tool that helps us with environmental design. And really, what you're trying to see is where does the blue and white areas here, where the humidity is okay, line up with the kind of light pink areas, and when it's red, it's too hot. So there's only little parts of the shoulder seasons that the air quality is dry enough outside to be comfortable inside. So again, natural ventilation is not, the most viable strategy year round, although it is right now. So open your windows. So we also kind of look at the economy, and this is just a graph of the state GDP per capita, with the Midwest versus the coast. And, Indiana is actually one of the lower GDPs per capita. And, this kind of manifests itself in, a lot of our state's approach to attracting business into the state is, cutting costs, lowering taxes and things like that. So, these sunshades and these big air conditioners cost money. And so when you're when you're trying to sell a business on low cost of doing business, well, you don't really want to spend more money on your building. And so kind of expanding on the economy a little bit and kind of getting into our culture, we always think of Indiana as sort of an agricultural state. We take a lot of pride in grow and we feed the world. But it's in terms of our business, it's really only about 2.8%, which is a little bit more than most of our neighbors. It's not quite as much as you see in Kansas and the Dakotas. But the outliers really, and this is something I was kind of surprised to learn, is that 27% of our GDP is tied to manufacturing. But if you think about it, it's actually pretty interesting because we have proximity to the Great Lakes, and this is sort of how steel is made. You're pulling iron ore through Lake Superior down Lake Michigan into a lot of our steel mills in Gary, and then we're also sending grain through here. That this has been a really great strategic and logistic place for us. And something I didn't know is that Indiana was actually the U.S.'s leading producer of steel, and a lot of that goes into our buildings. And it's also, we call it the crossroads of America because, you can get halfway to the halfway point of the country within 1 day on a semi truck. So that's about Oklahoma City. You're fairly close to a lot of, seaports as well as our nation's capital. And we make a lot of things in Indiana. You'll see a lot of these cars on the road. I always try to get my tomatoes from Red Gold and things like that. And we use, the Firestone building products. But when something that keep in mind is that when one of these companies closes, it's bad news, and it's really devastating because we've had so many great little towns with great buildings, a walkable infrastructure, human scaled, that's just great to walk around. And when the factory closes and takes a third of the workforce, it's devastating. And being able to revitalize and reuse these structures is a key to keeping that 11% of the carbon that we create from ever being generated. So kind of talk about the cost and the payback of building green, going back to the standard in 2003 and what just our standard building code does today for an office building. So it gets us down to 52 kBTU a square foot. Just kind of remember the number. That's how much energy we use per square foot of building. To get on target for using zero in 2030, we should be using 19.5. So if we look at a 5-year payback, which is the business case, we can get from 52 down to 43. If we look at a 15-year payback, we can chop another 2 off and get down to 41. But we still have a long way to go to get to 19. And so this all kind of starts to factor into the fact that the 2050 is when the world leaders agreed to limit global warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. And so that's coming up pretty soon. We're within 20 years of that. And I think it's starting to resonate a little bit more because, that's a mortgage. And the financial services sector is starting to pay attention. BlackRock's CEO, BlackRock's a big, financial services company, owns billions of dollars of investments. They're starting to factor climate change into their assessments because if you look here, it kind of aligns with their depreciation and some other investment timeframes, and they want to make sure that it has value within 30 years. But more importantly, to kind of pull at our heartstrings a little bit, it's a generation. The kids that are born today are going to inherit the world and what it's like in 2050 based on what we do today. And all this talk about GDP kind of leads me to one of my favorite quotes by Bobby Kennedy, is that it measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And so we've known about this climate change problem for a long time. They've been telling us about this since before I was born in February 1979. And there's these images of Manhattan being underwater, but I'm seeing the bunch of financial office space. We can work from home now, and there's probably some condos here that are second homes. I don't know that this really resonates with Midwesterners the way it does with someone who lives in Manhattan. But I hope that this does. This is an image that the Purdue Climate Change Research Center put together that kind of describes, what Indiana's climate will look like under different scenarios. So if we do the right thing, kind of manage our emissions, our summers will be a little bit like Memphis, and our winters will still get snow, it'll be a little bit more like Baltimore. If we don't do the right thing, we start to end up like Arkansas, or in 2080, when our grandchildren were born, Corpus Christi, Texas. And kind of going back to the what we were talking about earlier, this is what Indianapolis climate looks like today. We know it's going to get six degrees warmer in the summer, but the temperature delta will be the same. But if we don't do the right thing, it'll end up being 9 to 10 degrees hotter in the summer, just like southern Texas, and we're still going to get snow in the winter. And we know how that worked out for Texas just a few months ago. But then it also gets harder for us to design our buildings because our temperature range has expanded. So just kind of remembering that, 30% does not equal 100%. And kind of speaking to the emotional aspect of it, climate change is an expensive problem. And while the sustainable design community has been very focused on getting the financial power of corporate America behind it, it's a worldwide problem. And any approach to sustainability is incomplete if it only speaks to corporate America and the coasts. A complete approach to sustainability must be inclusively impactful and reach the wide swaths of America that don't have a stake in corporate America, as well as those of us who may not live within a stone's throw of the beach. And so I wanted to gather up some stories of fellow Hoosiers who have been a lot of active in a lot of these communities and share a little bit about how they've been able to relate, resonate, and make an impact. And with that, I'll hand it off to Arin Anderson.
Thanks, Joe. So I wanted to just preface my slides here with sharing with you guys that the bulk of the work that I try to do does find itself in creative placemaking and also in what I would say youth development, or at least getting the younger generations excited about being in Indiana. So for
Arin, I think we have froze up.
communities and how we can engage people there. So am I losing you guys?
You froze up a little bit right
It
there.
froze up
Okay.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Jump to the next slide.
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
All right.
So what you're going to see in that first slide was I currently am in Pendleton in Madison County. So my community is really Madison County as a whole right now. So really outside of the city, we're working in rural areas. And Falls Park in Pendleton was traditionally a treasure, I guess, of Indiana. It was something that people came from all over the state to come see, to come experience. They had a natural swimming hole, which you'll see in some of these historic photos here. And in the 70s, that got closed permanently. After that, it's really been kind of a scramble to figure out how to keep the people engaged in the environmental resources that we have in our community and how beautiful they really are. So one of the projects that we did recently with a group I started last year called Fall Creek Arts and Culture was a partnership with the Parks Department and the senior classes in the high school. Basically, the Parks Department bought a collection of new trash cans. We were noticing some litter issues around the park, and they were just really increasing in the trails, in the creek, in everywhere. And so we partnered with the park. They bought a bunch of new trash cans. We delivered them to the high school senior art class, and each student took one and created it around this idea of rural imagination. As a theme. And I think we're getting our final one back today, actually, and they're going out into the wild in the next week, delivered all over the park as kind of reminders to be responsible with our area and keep it clean and get excited about what we have to offer in our community. So that's one project that is kind of near and dear to my heart here. This is just a simple, it seems simple, but it's a mural over in Anderson I was a part of toward the middle of last year with one of the arts organizations there that is seeking to revitalize old buildings in downtown. So Anderson is one of those communities that got struck really hard by the factories leaving, and the community itself does have a relatively high poverty rate and a relatively high abandonment rate of buildings, of structures, of just issues in general. And so this is one of the projects we're doing to revitalize the community in general. So what you're seeing here is that one's actually my daughter. That was me up on the scaffolding, but we're helping paint. It's a paint by number kind of deal for a community mural. We invited the community over, we sketched everything out, and started painting this over the course of, I believe it was a week and a half, where it got done on the back of one of the old buildings downtown. And this final project here, I'm going to kind of pivot gears a little bit and actually pop into Adrian's territory a little bit. So, but this is a partnership we have had with Purdue for several years. And one of our favorite projects we did with them was on getting young girls excited about STEM projects, about industry, manufacturing, engineering, architecture, all sorts of different things. And this project is called Make Like a Girl. It's a workshop that engages high school girls, 9th through 12th grade, in this particular one was robotics, but it's all about creating something from nothing. And what we were finding a lot from this project, or the reason we started, was there was a serious drop off in interest in STEM careers from girls starting in middle schools. So in elementary school, there's a ton of excitement, a ton of interest, a ton of imagination about how can I better the world? How can I use my imagination to do really great things in the world, be that environmental design or building robots, right? And then that seriously declines by the time that they're done with middle school and starting into high school. It's very minimal participation from girls in STEM projects. So this was one project that we did to kind of combat that and get the girls excited in a really comfortable environment. It was all girls, all different backgrounds, really just playing in the STEM world for an entire day. What you see there is me giving away a bunch of free stuff for people sharing on social media and Snapchat. And we were really trying to engage them through messaging and design, and meeting them where they were, and not trying to throw messages at them that they weren't going to connect with. So. And then this is the next year. So we really tried to get some branding and messaging that would translate from year to year and really just kind of what we say glow up every year. And so this was year 2. And that's a photo of one of our classes that went through the workshop. Yeah, we actually ended up having to cap this a month before it started because we had so many registrations, which was really exciting for us. And I actually think we've had several girls end up going to Purdue Polytechnic School and majoring in things like mechatronics and some organizational design and things like that. So it's been really cool to watch it happen.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, here are some videos. I think we'll probably skip over these and
that's totally fine.
Share them with share the links when anyone wants to check them out because they're pretty cool. But with that, we'll kind of hand off to Adrian Russell.
Thanks a lot, Joe and Arin. One, I'll say that's super, super cool.
Yeah.
So, and it actually is a perfect handoff. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I've been in construction for 10 years now, and most of my career focus has entailed managing projects. I've had the incredible opportunity to run projects in over 13 states, which has been simply phenomenal. However, one thing that I've witnessed in virtually every location that I've worked has been the increasingly concerning skilled labor shortages that pose a considerable threat to the future of our industries. And on the same hand, being born and raised on the inner city of Indianapolis and remaining heavily involved in my community, I can also tell you that there are thousands upon thousands of kids who come from backgrounds just like me that have no idea what they're really good at, much less what they'll ever be when they get older. That's if they get older. Over the course of the year 2020, I had the opportunity to grow closer to a team of individuals who, just like me, love the building and design industries, but also desire to use their professions to make a lasting impact in our local community. And what developed quite naturally after much brainstorming and painstaking conversations where we were just looking for solutions and something to do to make an impact, what developed was Russell's Building Camp. So back in December, there is a church located on the near east side of Indianapolis, and they embarked upon a major renovation project to their auditorium. And after my team approached the church with the idea of involving youth as a way to teach the many life skills that come through building, the life skills that come through construction, and also offering the opportunity for those youth to learn these skills in a safe haven, such as a church, before we knew it, Russell's Building Camp became a real actual thing, much to my surprise. Many local businesses, they played a huge part, a pivotal role in sponsoring our camps, from brands such as large as Lowe's Home Improvement, Chick-fil-A, Blaze Pizza, all the way down to one-man local shops such as My Russ Films and Ricky T Marketing. Those may or may not be shameless plugs, by the way. But our first camp was held back in December, late December, just before Christmas. And it was really a test rollout. We actually had 12 kids attend, and we introduced them to the world of building, introduced them to the basic hand tools, and we gave them the opportunity to just have fun in a safe environment, learning about building, which was basically within this church auditorium, a project to where they could even see the demolition that was taking place within this auditorium and just get a feel for what construction is all about. We had 12 kids present, and we had an amazing time over the course of 2.5 hours. And after a huge reaction, which for me was in some ways unexpected, after a huge reaction from the kids and from the parents, we then returned in late January with our next camp, where then we had 27 kids. And then in late February, we had our third camp, where we had 40 kids. And our fourth camp will be held next Friday, where already our enrollment is at just under 60. Our volunteer base has went from 5 to over 20. And we're just super excited where we're giving these kids the opportunity to, one, have fun, but then to also learn how things come together. Giving them the opportunity to learn how to use their hands and how to use their minds to build and create, as opposed to tearing down. I mean, there's a lot of messaging in the news. There's a lot of messaging in society today where a lot of these kids that are coming from at-risk backgrounds, they don't know what they're good at. And they've been told by so many different outlets that, you know, they'll end up in prison or end up dead and in the grave. So we're teaching them another way on how to use their minds and how to use their hands to create and put things together to build. And we believe that the discipline of building, we believe that the skills that they're learning, we believe that even if they don't go into the construction industry, even if they don't go on to be an architect or an engineer, we believe that these lessons and these skills that they're learning, they will invaluably benefit them over the course of their lives in whatever they choose to do. So already we've received testimonials and reports that have come out of the camp where some kids were struggling in reading, struggling in school, and now we're seeing turnarounds with those kids. So we're extremely excited, and it would be impossible, as I said, without the community coming together, a community of individuals, but not just do-gooders, but also companies, also small businesses, large businesses coming together, all working together to make a difference in our community and make a difference in the lives of these kids. So we're extremely excited. I'm extremely grateful, one, for the team that you see pictured, where, I mean, that's just a few of them. And I'm just very blown away by what we're experiencing and what we're seeing. And we can't wait for the next camping to see how this continues to progress and grow. And hopefully it will intersect our interest to want to make a difference, a sustainable difference in our community through the building and design industry. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Andrea Haydon with Studio Haydon Company.
Joe. Yeah. Thanks, Joe. And also, so Adrian and Joe are a part of the ACE mentors as well. So it's really great. They're teaching, the youth all about the AEC industry. And actually, Adrian, now that I saw some of those photos again, I could have used your help on this mural, actually, that we're talking about next, because we had to build some frames for this.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
I know. Next time. So yeah, I'm Andrea Haydon. I am an artist, a graphic designer, and a human-centered designer. So the next project I'm going to be talking about is the Noblesville North Alley activation. The next slide. So Noblesville, Indiana is my hometown, and about 6 years ago or so, they were allocated funding. The Nickel Plate Arts in the city of Noblesville were allocated funding to enrich their alleys downtown. So specifically, their north, south, and east. South Alley has already been activated, and so this was about the North Alley. And so these were pre-existing conditions before we added the mural and the go-go lights. So this kind of shows you that at one point, this was actually a drivable alley. So you can go to the next slide. And so they proposed a mural or put an RFP out for a mural. And this is one of my concepts. And what they were looking for was something vibrant and geometric and something that kind of reflects how Noblesville is. So of course, I did the state of Indiana as one of my 3 concepts, and I just was like, okay, hopefully they pick this one. And there's no rhyme or reason really for the geometric shapes that go within the state of Indiana. It's not counties or anything, but it's just there to kind of abstractly show that this is how Indiana is broken down. The next slide. So these are some in progress photos. So the upper left-hand side, or the upper top, left-hand side is where I could have used Adrian's help, because we had to build these massive 5 by 10 foot frames to get this projected. And so this took me, it was a pretty quick turnaround. So again, this was a 6-year kind of project on the city side, but I was only given about 4 weeks. So 16 days over 4 weeks, because I was also working a few days a week. It was insane. So next slide. And so this is how it ended up turning out. So you'll see again in the upper left-hand side, they added a beautiful iron archway that actually is displayed it will be displayed on the south and the east as well, if it's not already up. That was also done by a local artist named Kevin Huff. So it all signifies which side you're on, but also the 1823, which is when Noblesville was established. So in the end, which was really great about this, sorry, real quick, was that, when I designed this, it was all about, I lived there, I grew up there, I ran these streets. So knowing that, folks get their photos taken in front of these, they have senior photos, engagement, I wanted to create something that was a destination spot to have your photo taken. Next project. Okay, so the Mary Ray Community Garden, this is one of my babies, and this was through the help of actually my senior year at Haydon School of Art and Design. So shout out to Haydon, you guys are great. So next slide. So yeah, this was something that I had started my senior year with an amazing group of students at Arin, and then I kind of took it a little bit further into volunteering. So I used to be at Ratio, and this is one of our projects this is like one of our volunteering initiatives that we did, was work with Mary Rigg on the near southwest side of Indianapolis. And I created these little cards, these garden cards that had just your general span of veggies, nothing too crazy, but carrots, basil, arugula. And each card was signified by either green, yellow, or red. So it was very easy to understand, like, okay, so green means this is a pretty easy veggie to grow. Yellow meant, okay, it might need a little bit more, attention. And then red meant either it was super invasive or just, you just got to be careful because it might need space. So for example, corn, you need 10 by 10 foot space to grow corn. I didn't know that, until we started doing this. And on the back of each of these cards as well. So unlike seed packets where it's very scientific, it's just stuff, language is really hard to understand. We made it very easy. So just writing our own words. And then we also included like best ways to actually cook these vegetables. And so again, the audience for this was kids and seniors. And at Mary Rigg, they have senior living, and then they have after school programs for kids. So we just felt like, let's combine the both. We got 5 garden beds. How do we plan this? So we had the kids work in teams. We also had the seniors work on their own team. And then they had to then work together to figure out, okay, so these are the veggies we want to grow, but we need to figure out compatibility. So I created this chart that helped them to understand, okay, what grows well together, because not everything grows well together. So again, for example, jalapenos or any kind of peppers, you want to be careful where you plant those next to, because they will affect the heatness of whatever that is. So whether that's cucumbers or tomatoes. So again, they had to work together. Then they were able to create their own raised garden bed blueprint. So you go to the next slide. So when it came to planting day, they had everything ready. They were totally prepared. And again, we were there to help assist them how to actually, again, plant these seeds. And we also had actually I think it was Lowe's as well that helped us out with donating seeds and plants. That was great. And then the next slide is just another shot of how it looked afterwards. And yeah, they grew veggies. It was great. And this is another good example about like growing, being sustainable and growing your own food. And the seniors specifically loved it because, as you can see, those windows there, that's where they live. There's also a second story, so they can check on them. And they were so excited and so appreciative to be able to grow their own foods in their backyard.
I want a spicy cucumber, so I'm going to plant my jalapenos right next to my cucumbers. No, this is really great to see, and I love to see the common threads of meeting people where they are, engaging with the kids, celebrating diversity, and building excitement in the next generation, and how you guys are all using your minds and hands to create a lot of these tangible elements that you can touch and see up close in our communities. In my line of work, we're so often focused on the pretty pictures and the big picture, and managing the millions of dollars that go into it, and it's really cool to see when people really take ownership of it and bring life to it and kind of start to add this granular detail and almost artisanship into it. So I see we got a question in the chat, but before we, and I'm probably getting a little short on time, but I wanted to kind of open up discussion real quick with a question to the panelists. But how would a story of sustainability weave into the stories of the communities that you work in? And what would you ask of us architects in supporting your communities? I'm going to start with you, Arin, then I'll go to Adrian, then same order.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is just talking to the communities and really understanding. So in the line of work that I do in branding and design, a lot of it comes from stories, right? It's and in the rural areas in particular, where I spend a lot of my time, there's a lot of concern with preserving history and preserving tradition. Whereas, and a lot of times that can be seen as, oh, this new guy is coming in and trying to really blow up everything we've built and our histories and our traditions and all these things. And so for me, I think maybe a big thing is just understanding how to effectively have those conversations before, during, and after things happen. And it's really that process, I think, that's important.
Great. Thank you. How about you, Adrian?
Along the same lines, I would say understanding that community that you're designing for. I'll say in the area that I grew up in, just off the 21st and College, which years ago was a lot different than what you see today. I'll say that, if ever there were a time where an architect or a designer came in, we knew that was pretty much an announcement that, we're no longer welcome in that neighborhood. if you understand what I mean. So
Mhm.
I think that it's imperative that designers, that they, one, as Arin said, communication and communicating to those individuals that you're designing for, that no, we have you in mind. We would love your feedback. If we're designing a park, what works on the north side may not work on the south side. If we're designing a community center, what works on the east side may not work on the west side. So I think it's imperative that you try to capture the spirit and the essence of that local community in the design, which will give them a feeling of inclusion and a feeling of being welcome and part of that future structure.
Yeah, something I always kind of feel is important, and I liked Andrea's mural, but a lot of times, you can look and see where there are murals like Arin and Andrea have done in communities, and to me, that always indicates that there are people who have an emotional connection to what's going on in that community, and we have to be kind of careful about just paving over it. But I'll hand off to Andrea real quick. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. No, real quick. So again, I totally agree with Arin and Adrian, of course. I think a lot of it really is, I have a few years of public engagement underneath my belt. You're never going to make everybody happy. So whatever you bring into community, it's really about really making that emotional connection and that relationship with somebody. Even if it's just like, if somebody's really angry at a community engagement meeting, it's like stepping aside and listening to what they have to say. Half the time they just want you to listen. But then on top of that, I think it's just creating that ownership, that sense of ownership, but also letting them know that, hey, you're the expert here. You live here. This is your community. You tell us, what do you need done, or what, we're here to gather that information. And again, it could be kind of tricky, but
Yeah.
Go on and on, but we'll keep it.
Well, I think we're coming up on time, but there is one question in the chat here, and as to whether or not there's been any dialogue around the idea that might indicate an immigration of people from the coast to the Midwest due to climate change. I think a lot of that is probably less, east-west movement, and more north-south movement, because the coasts are somewhat, while they're at risk from sea level rise, their climate is still sort of moderated by being next to the body of water. But what I think that kind of opens up is that, the pandemic has taught us that we can work from home, and, to me, I almost wonder if this isn't like bringing a factory back to Anderson. So if we kind of take some of these areas of town, like the areas of the cities that we're just driving through real quick, and actually start to make them communities, start putting like a library, like what do you need to make an effective, work from home destination, where we're, just walking a little bit to have a meeting and a coffee and working from home, is that, this could effectively stem some of the brain drain that I think that both Arin and Adrian touched on in both rural and urban communities, to, have people stay there, invest in the community, and work there, and that lower cost of living that we're advertising in Indiana really kind of comes into play. So if we can make places that are emotionally attached, vibrant and exciting, we can really start to bring jobs back in the communities if we make them great places to be. So I don't think we have any other questions in there, but I wanted to open it up to any closing comments from the three or thoughts you might have on that question.
I would say no, go ahead, Arin.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I have noticed, I'm not sure it's indication that it's due to climate change, but I have noticed that there are more people in this particular design, brand, creative industries there's been jokes that there's mass exodus from New York City and from some of the major cities in general, coming to places where people can quote unquote breathe, where they feel like they can have a little bit of space to stretch out and get creative. And I think that Indiana has a lot of that to offer. And I think that one thing we've mentioned in some of our side conversations is, again, there's a lot of siloed conversations out here. And I think I'm seeing yes. I think that there are people that want to come out here, and I think if we can get communities talking to each other and excited about what we can do creatively together, I think we're going to be an attractive area for people to want to look at.
Absolutely. I feel the exact same. And I'll say, Arin, for you, and then even for you, Andrea, what you all are working on, I think that that is a pivotal next step as far as a bridge, if you will, no pun intended, for our communities where, you know, even a conversation such as sustainability, you know, I can recall within my community where, you know, a few years ago, that's not even a word that people even use. So having said that,
Absolutely.
right, but having said that, you know, these types of programs and these types of initiatives, it just puts us one step closer to making these subjects not so foreign or not so exotic, but more so a necessity and requirement, and absolutely something that's critically important to all of our future. So I would say way to go to both of you all, because you definitely inspired me. And I think that that's a pivotal next step.
Aww. Same to you, Adrian.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think we're probably coming up on time here. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I don't know if we have time to take any more. Or... Well, I think, what's that?
Thank you so much for that. That was super awesome. I'm not sure where we're at with Pete, but it looks like we're at
Okay. Hey, welcome back, guys. Okay, so now it's time for one of my favorite parts of life, food. We're going to take a lunch break, and don't forget to use this time to network with other people as well. Check out our merch at IndyDesignWeek.com/merch. Rep the merch so we can, you know, grow and do even bigger next year. And stay tuned, because the day is not over. We got lots of great talks coming up still, including topics about how to sustain freelance careers and how to deal with burnout. Those are really big for our industry, so you don't want to miss that. So grab some lunch, go network, and we'll see you back here at 1:30.